So the first question, what's the distinct feature of the healthcare plan of the UK? For me, the key point is that it is that everybody, irrespective of how much money they have or where they sit, where they are in society, will get the healthcare they need when they need it. It is always free at the point of delivery, so they get it. They get their healthcare for free, and it's paid for by taxation from the state. It does mean that everybody, irrespective of poverty or how rich they are, can get care. There is a increasing move for people with more money to start to take out more private healthcare, but for the majority of the population, it still relies on state-delivered healthcare. I think the other thing to say is that over recent years, about the last 8 to 10 years, the quality within the NHS has generally increased significantly. One of the features used to be very long waiting lists for treatment, but they have now, they had until recently reduced right down to less than 18 weeks for just about everybody from most treatments. The difficulty with the UK healthcare plan, with the NHS, I suppose one of the big difficulties is money. That it is a state-provided system is expensive. Providing free healthcare for everybody is expensive. It's actually a lot more It has been a lot more cost-effective than other healthcare systems. Comparison with the United States system, on average, their United States health system costs around about $8,000 per person per year, whereas the UK system costs around $3,000 per person per year for a full universal health service. And the merits of the UK's healthcare plan, again, is that everybody can get it. There are difficulties in access. Although theoretically everybody has exactly the same access, people who have more money or more education tend to be better at using the service, so they can end up getting better care. People who have less education or less money don't tend to turn up later on in their disease. They tend to present to medical services when when their conditions got a lot worse. So that their outcomes from treatment are a lot worse, mainly because they come a lot later. Wider than just the health service, the similar as everywhere, is the health inequalities, is the difference in health between the richest and the poorest. Even with the universal healthcare service, there is still very large gaps between the richest and the poorest. On average, it's about 7 years difference in life expectancy. But beyond that, the biggest gap is in what's called disability-free life expectancy. So how long people live before they get a long-term condition, before they get a chronic disease. And people who are poorer don't live as long, and they spend a lot more of their life with a chronic disease. So there are problems with that, which we're trying to work to tackle. I think in comparison to other healthcare systems, the other one I know best is the United States system. I don't know how common that is, how similar that is to the Korean system, but certainly the United States system. I was over there last year, and they've got 50 million people with no real access to healthcare, and the difference in the quality of healthcare between people who can pay to go private and people who have to rely on state-provided services, the difference in quality of care and speed of treatment is enormous. And people are dying from treatable conditions purely because they can't afford to access the care, or they're not in America legally, so they can't access the care. The big change at the moment, which Peter may have covered, is the current reforms to the healthcare system. The NHS has been in place since 1948, and there have been regular changes to how it works. There's been regular changes to the structures, to how it's run. But this, over the last 2 years, the changes that are going on now are the biggest there have ever been, and it's changing the whole nature of the system. There's a lot more private company involvement in healthcare, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's being done in such a way that the quality doesn't necessarily go along with it. There's a strong move towards a market-based healthcare system, so that they try to use competition between companies to drive up quality. But healthcare isn't really a market, because healthcare isn't really a market because most people don't have a choice. The healthcare they can access will be paid for by the clinical commissioning group or one of the new structures. But so the individual people will have very little, won't actually have a choice. So there's no real market. And I think that's one of the key problems about the way things are going at the moment. And I think again, it's complex. Did you want to know about the funding? How it's funded? How the money for the healthcare?
What?
Did you want to know about how the money works for healthcare?
Yes.
Yeah. At the moment, the money comes from the state, from central state, from the Department of Health and the NHS, the National Health Service. That money then comes down to local areas. At the moment, it comes to organisations called primary care trusts. Those primary care trusts have the responsibility for commissioning, for buying all the healthcare for the population they serve. Under the new structures, that will be similar, but the people buying the healthcare will be through the general practitioners, through the family doctors. There's a lot less money in the system, so there will be a lot less resources to buy the healthcare that people need. There's questions about how well the new organisations can match the healthcare they need to buy to what they need to provide. The management of the health service is becoming a lot more complex with a number of different organisations. But basically the money comes from central government to an organisation that then has the responsibility for buying the healthcare for a population. And under the new system, there's going to be a lot more organisations involved in that. You can look it up on. We've got clinical commissioning groups. You've got the National Health Service Commissioning Board. You've got commissioning support services. You've got public health, which will now be going into local government. And there's a lot of different people buying different bits of the service. And there's a big risk that will become fragmented, that there'll be confusion over who's buying what and how it's supposed to work, and whose responsibility it is to buy different bits of healthcare. I think that's a real challenge, because the people who will suffer at the end of the day will be the patients, and especially the patients who don't have as much money and who live in more challenged areas. So that's really about that. Have I answered your questions okay? Is there anything else?
Oh,
I can come down to these.
okay.